Well, hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership at Heart podcast. And today I'm super excited to have Jana Cinnamon on. And I found her, like I do many of the guests that you hear me talk to, just scrolling through LinkedIn and looking for stories that catch me. And stories are really windows to the soul. And it really says to me, this person has emotional intelligence. And so at some point, I'm going to have her tell that story because it was just something that really brought me there. But it showed to me that she does lead with heart. And again, it has nothing to do with title. It's just how you show up as a person. And so that's why you're on the show. So welcome here, Jana.
Thank you, Heather. Glad to be here.
Okay. So where are you right now in your leadership journey anyway?
That's a great question. Beginning, middle, my current role, so I'm in a title that clearly goes, oh, you're a leader. I'm a chief operating officer of a CPA firm. And right away, the question that goes with that is, oh, you must be a CPA or you're an accountant. I work with 90% of my, coworkers are accountants. And that's not the case. My background is in human resources. And I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I was always naturally this leader. I was always gravitating towards leadership opportunities, whether, as a child, in college, all of that. But I graduated really not knowing what I wanted to do. And I kind of fell into human resources when I found the training and development function. And that's where I really decided, hey, I could do this as a career. I could do, how can I help people grow and develop in their professional lives? And so that's how I joined the CPA firm about 9 years ago, was to help with their training and development and recruiting. And I was going to take leadership of that. And it was very much this functional type of, I can be the person to help fill this need at the firm. And what I found was that when it comes to the people, that affects every area of the business. And when it comes to equipping people to be successful, that comes into every initiative and everything you want to try to achieve as an organization. And so I found myself inserting myself into almost every conversation within the firm that was going on, because it was like, well, what's going on here? What's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Why are you trying to achieve that? How does that affect the clients? How does that affect our employees? And suddenly I was tasked to run our IT department because they needed some further guidance and there was a need. And so it was like, it became this, because I was thinking about the people and because I was curious, that I started to take on more things. So it started with IT, and then it was, hey, our administrative team needs some further structure and guidance. And, oh, what about our marketing department? And it started to just kind of grow into this, can you help? Because I had this curiosity and this mindset. The lens that I was always looking through in everything was, how does this affect our people? How do we make sure people are confident and comfortable with what we're doing? How do we get people excited for the future? All of those things. We're a very mission-driven organization that has goals and vision for the future. And that really made me see that leadership is not about a function, but it is about being there to equip and help others achieve what they want to do. And so I would say in my journey, it's one of those things of really stepping back and realizing that leadership is something that in every area of your life that you're showing up can be demonstrated. And so, yes, I've been given responsibility, and yes, I've been put into a position that is a leadership position, but it's really more so seeing I have an opportunity to do that every day in all of my interactions.
I love that. And so let's go to the story of what like piqued my interest about you to begin with, so that people can know, like, ooh, that's why she's in there. Tell us that story. Tell us what happened.
So yes, the story that you're referring to was, I was in the car with my husband and daughter. We were on our way in rural Wisconsin to drop my daughter off at summer camp. And we're driving through a small town, and I see on the side of the road is a young girl sitting at a table with a lemonade stand. And she was slumped in her chair, looking entirely defeated, um, just really looking kind of down. And we had driven past it. I saw it just as we were passing it. And I turned to my husband and I say, whoa, we've got to turn around. We've got to go back to that lemonade stand. And he knows by now, because this has happened before. I made a commitment to myself when I was a child. I did lemonade stands myself, and I remember feeling frustrated many times seeing cars drive by and wondering, why does nobody stop? And so I made a commitment to myself as a child. When I grow up, when I'm an adult, if I ever see a lemonade stand, I'm going to stop. So turn around to the car. My husband stays in the car, but my daughter and I get out. We walk over to her and I say, hey, can I get 3 glasses of lemonade, please? And they were 75 cents each, but I handed her 20 and I said, keep the change. And I said, dream big, you know, you keep doing what you're doing, kind of thing. And I gave her these words of encouragement, and you could see she was like, really? That I was going to really give her
Mm,
$20 for 3 glasses of lemonade. I'm like, yep, absolutely. And immediately she sat up in her chair. She sat taller. She smiled from
mm,
ear to ear. And we got back in the car. We had to drive back out around, and her entire demeanor, her entire, the way she was sitting, you could see that we made a difference for her that day. And I hope for longer too, that
mm.
she doesn't give up, right? And that she continues to put herself out there.
Oh, that's it. I love that. It's such a powerful story. Like I said, I was looking going, oh my gosh, this person exhibits so much heart. And the thing is this was just her driving by. Like this was you just Jana driving by. It wasn't it had nothing to do with title, which is the thing I want to try to continue to highlight is that, this is for folks just wherever you're at. Like you said earlier, it's showing up a certain way, being intentional about showing up a certain way. That people look to you for guidance, and in this case, just idea of making someone feel important, making someone feel like you've noticed them and that the
Yeah.
work they do means something. And it's so critical to have that. And as you said, like, her posture just completely changed and you could see like, okay, there's confidence and I'm doing something like worthwhile here. And just imagine if we had more of that at work, right? This kind of behavior that you're talking about at work, whether it's to a manager or coworker or customers who are giving that kind of showing that kind of appreciation and recognition in the human sense. I'm recognizing you and what you're doing and recognizing the efforts you're doing and it's important is
Right.
so, isn't it just, it's like foundational, isn't it?
Right. Right. And I I think about it as I was always the type of person, I don't know if you relate to this, Heather, of growing up and over the years, I'm a do life big kind of person, right? Where it's like, oh, if I'm throwing my daughter a birthday party, it's going to be the best birthday party you've ever had, right? Like I like to do these really grand gestures and kind of these over the top kind of things. And I do think, you're one, Heather, who you talk a lot about. It's not just the words you say. It's not just, oh, I care about you, but it's the actions. And the reality is with the caring piece and demonstrating that for others, showing heart, it doesn't have to be grand. It can be the smallest thing, the smallest little token or gesture that shows somebody that you care. I think that's really the thing to remember, because I think sometimes we think that we have to do, oh, my coworker is sick, I need to go home and make them 7 batches of soup and fresh bread and, whatever. Like, no, that's awesome if you do that. But you also could just send them a note in the mail saying, I'm thinking about you. I hope you feel better. It doesn't have to be grand. Caring happens in the small too.
It really does. I'm doing a TEDx at the end of this month on the radical power of carrying leadership, and basically you just like there's one whole paragraph that's what you just said. So true. So I'm like, I may even insert your story as one of the examples because there's having the stories in there so that they can see it doesn't have to be some big thing, but that we all have to be intentional about it. And also the other thing is that for me, it's not a random act of kindness either. It's being intentional about establishing the human connection and the relationship with a person, and maybe even for the long haul if you can. And so that it's a little bit nuanced. Random act really is like, I don't know you, and I'm just gonna make you feel good.
Right.
And in this case, it's like I'm thinking about the human connection. I'm looking at relationships, and that might be more than just like a one event type of occurrence.
Right.
And I think that that's it's something, in this case, it was in fact, like, it wasn't really random. I mean, it was a random act, but it was kind of like, it was intentional because for you, it was founded on this idea of no one, I didn't feel important. People didn't stop for me. I want someone to feel important. It was, I feel like it's just, it's different. It has a why or a mission behind it.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's the really cool part about your story and what you did for her. I mean, and again, just thinking about how we expand upon that ripple idea. What if we did that at work? If we did that in our homes, if we did that in our churches, like whatever, right? What if we did that more consistently and more intentionally?
Right. I
What would
think
that
the
look like?
intentional piece that you talk about there, it's the keeping your eyes open and it's being aware and paying attention to things, right? Like it's hard to demonstrate care if you're not paying attention to the world around you, because it
Mm,
is, me stopping for the lemonade stand was because I didn't have my nose buried in my phone. It was, my eyes were up, my eyes were looking. Otherwise, we could have totally passed by that girl. And it's that paying attention to the people around you. You're not going to be able to. It's going to feel like it's going to be a random act of kindness, right? If you have
yes.
nothing to base it on, no connection, no
Yes.
thing to draw upon. I know it is for whatever within me. There is this awareness I have for people and my surroundings. One of the things that I think of, another story I would just share briefly, my boss, oftentimes he goes, I don't know that I've ever met anybody as thoughtful as you.
Mm,
And what I would say is it is this paying attention to what's going on. So an example of one of the things that he said that to me recently was he had shared in a meeting that his daughter just passed her permit driving test. And a few days later, I was going through a Starbucks drive-through, and I know that his daughter is a big fan of going through Starbucks. That's come up on a multiple occasions. And I thought, you know what? I should send her a $10 gift card and say, hey, congratulations on passing your driver's permit. Make sure you practice going through the Starbucks drive-through because that's a life skill. And so I sent her this $10 gift card and she was blown away. And my boss was blown away that, what made you think of that? That was awesome. And it was one of those, again, it's just the paying attention to those things. Why
hmm
should I be carrying that? In the grand scheme of things, of everything I've got going on, why would that grab my attention? Well, it does because I care about people, and that's a life thing that's happening for somebody, and I'm listening. But that's how you care, is by paying attention,
Yeah.
eyes open, ears open.
Yes, it's so true. I always tell, the kind of prerequisite for that caring leader is the awareness. So it's like,
Hmm.
and you can't get aware unless you're listening. So you gotta pay attention, and then you gotta have the desire to do something about it. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like you have to decide. You have to say, I'm gonna do more than just listen and be empathetic. I'm actually gonna take action, and that's where that next kind of desire to do something. And then this whole idea. The third thing is, do you have the kind of the stamina to see that change through? Whether it's like for you as a person, where you're saying, I want to be this. I want this to be a long-term change in me. I don't want it to be a one and done, that same type of situation. And with you, like, is it this level of intentionality that says, this is who I am. Uh, this is who I'm choosing to be. Even if I wasn't that person yesterday, I'm choosing to be that person today.
Yeah.
Right. Is
Right.
huge. Because I think
Right.
oftentimes we go, well, I don't know. I just really haven't been that way normally. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter
You
who you
build the
were
muscle,
yesterday.
you practice, and yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I love that. So I'm curious to know, like, where did your drive to lead come from? Did it stem from something else? Like, did it stem from something, when you were younger? I'm curious.
You know, I would say I think there must be something within me that I just was always somebody who wasn't really satisfied being on the sidelines. I wanted to be in the middle of whatever was going on. Maybe it was that fear of missing out thing of wanting that. I I remember I have this natural ability to, I think, see what may need to be done and figure out a course of action forward. So if I'm put into a situation and it's like, well, what are we trying to achieve here? Or what's going on? My mind naturally starts churning in terms of, well, how can we make that happen? And I remember early on, it was I was in high school, early in high school, and we had a musical at school. And I love to perform. I love to sing. I love to do all of that. And so I had auditioned to be in the musical. And a the director came to me and he said, "What do you think about being our stage manager?" And I know it was not because I couldn't sing or because I couldn't dance, right? Like it wasn't like, "Oh, we don't want you on the stage." But I kind of paused where I was like, that's not what I signed up for. And he said to me, he goes, "There's nobody like you who can make sure things get done and that you take," like he recognized something in me where I stopped and I thought, you're right, I do that. Like I make sure things happen. I make sure people are taken care of, that they are where they need to be. If something's missing, I just naturally have those eyes open to those things. And so I think it was something in me that just was kind of how I operated, but it took somebody actually saying, "Do you know you really do well here? That you really excel in doing this?" That made me actually reflect and go, "This is a strength." Like I think sometimes when some of those things are just naturally where you find yourself at first, you don't recognize that that's a talent and where your power is, and how do you further accept some of that. But I think for a long time, it was still for me, leadership is given to you. So I was still, for some time in my life, I thought it was something where somebody says, "Hey, this is your responsibility. This is something you are in the stage manager position, or you are in the, responsible for leading our training at this firm," or whatever it would be. Whereas it took a while for me to recognize that it was much more than just something you were given. It is something that any of us is given. It's just whether you assume that or not.
Wow. Wow. That's a lot to dive into, because I think just like we talked about earlier with all of this, you have to be paying attention,
Mhm.
right? You have to be paying attention. You have to have an openness to receive,
Right.
to be responsible, to step in, to step up. And if you don't pay attention and you don't have the openness, then it think like all kinds of those opportunities just passes by. Actually, the thing you're supposed to be doing in your life could be passing you by because your eyes aren't open, your ears aren't open, your heart's not open,
Right.
right? You're just not receiving the way you should be. So yeah, it's really, really powerful. Okay, so for those who are listening, because hey, we get there, and we can all see you're amazing. You just are. And we want to hear a time when maybe like you don't feel like you were the most proud of yourself as a leader. What did that look like from a story perspective specifically? And what did you do to come out of it? What did you do to really it doesn't mean come out of it to perfection. It means come out of that, valley into the to go back up that hill again, to go back into what we do inevitably as leaders, go back in valleys. But what did you do to come out of that? And what was it that you weren't like really particularly proud of at that point?
I would say, I mentioned earlier how I started in our company being in charge of training and development. And I kind of poked my nose in places and asked what is going on. And then I told you, ended up in charge of IT. Well, the story with that at the time was, we had a legacy IT system that we'd used for years. And I had heard that we were making a big change to a new system. And I heard about it, and it was about 6 weeks before I knew that we were supposed to go live to this new system, where I asked the questions. I said, "Well, so what is this change? What does it mean for our employees? What do I need to do?" And I started poking at it and asking questions. And I found that this is a huge thing, and we maybe had not recognized the magnitude of what we were going to be going through in about 6 weeks' time. And I started to recognize, here's an opportunity certainly for leadership. I need to step in, organize, make sure people know what is happening. I need to make sure that we've got the things taken care of that need to be taken care of. And it was absolutely daunting. And it was probably the first time in my life where I felt like I didn't have the ability to produce a great result. Again, I think, like I said, I'm a person who does life big, and I'm the person who will exceed expectations. And I've always been this high performer. And so at this point, it was every time in my career I'd been able to meet people's expectations or exceed people's expectations. But there was really a need for leadership in this situation. And I'm like, hey, I've got to get this all figured out. And I quickly realized that I was not going to be able to exceed expectations on this project. And I felt as though I started to spiral a bit in terms of pointing at all of the reasons why this was not going to be a good project, why this was not going to go well, why, you know, it I got into a place of a negative mindset where it's like, well, we should have done this and this should have been done. And oh, well, I wasn't involved. So this, if I had been involved, we wouldn't be at this point. And got into a pretty dark place for a while of, yeah, leaders needed, and I'm going to take care of what I can, but just some resentment around it. And I was not my best self because it was something I'd never experienced. Again, I didn't know how to have my name attached to something that didn't really go well. And it didn't go well. We didn't, it was a hard, difficult time for our company and for our employees, and people struggled and people had bad days and people were overwhelmed and they were frustrated and they were angry. And again, it was that dark place of wanting to not, I'm sorry if it was not my problem, kind of thing. And where I really had a turning point was this recognition of a leader's role is not to step up to the plate and hit a grand slam every time they get up to the plate. That's not the role that should be expected of me. That was what I experienced in life, is that I was always hitting the home run. I was hitting the grand slam. I was impressing people. That was what it was. I was a high performer. And that's what I did. And I realized I took a big step back and really reflected and realized, that was a situation where I wasn't even going to hit a single. My best bet at that point was to step up to the plate and get hit by the pitch and end up on plate just by getting hit by the pitch. But the recognition that that's not a failure. What my team needed was that I actually stepped up to the plate and that I didn't blame anybody else on the field for the fact that I stepped up to the plate and I wasn't going to hit a grand slam. The fact is that I stepped up to the plate, right? And so it was this recognition of, I can't control what happened the 7 innings before now. I can only control me stepping up to the plate now. And the fact that I'm stepping up to the plate, whether I swing and I miss, or whether I hit a single, or whether I fly ball, and whatever it is, I stepped up to the plate. And it was that results matter, but it's not what is the full focus of being a leader, right? It's not just the end outcome of that project was phenomenal or you got that big win. Sometimes it's again, you just step up to the plate. And I think that's really a huge turning point in my career, was recognizing you're not always going to be the grand slam hitter. You're not always going to be the one who exceeds all expectations and wows in everything you do. Sometimes you're just going to show up in that moment and be there.
Oh my gosh, is that and it's such a hard reality, isn't it? I mean, I think see that in everything I do. When I think about, like, especially as a speaker, it happens often where it's like, ugh, I think that was like my best performance. Or then there's other times you're like, yes, like I know I did it. But in that role, because it's singular versus like organizational, you do feel like it's more about you than anything, right? But I think when I think through this idea of not being tied to the outcome, but like being tied to the willingness to step up, that's pretty powerful. I think that if less of us were tied to the outcome and more to the fact that we just decided to someone had to do it and we stepped up, we'd get a lot more people stepping up. We'd have a lot less anxiety around leadership. But because we do see ourselves as like, I've got the bat cape on, got my shield, whatever, and no one's going to penetrate me, like that kind of thing.
Right.
It makes it really, it makes it not palatable for many people to do. But I think if we say, let's release the outcome, again, you have to have the result. Like, results is important in an organization, period. So we have to get results. But if we are just starting off with just results, there are people who I know, and I think about like folks and their behavioral style and the things that drive them, who are just super duper success oriented, very, very related. It's all about achieving, winning, and that's just all they care about. And that's a hard person to be, or hard walk to take, because of what you just said. So it's like, I'm glad I don't quite, I have some of that, but I've learned with wisdom, with age,
Right.
that what you talked about is that it's like, okay, Heather, like there's lots of variables in here and it's
Yes.
not all about you. But at the same time, you got to do the right thing. And you can't, people say to me, well, what if this person's not receptive to this? And what if I do this, but they don't do this? Well, you can't control them.
Right.
You
Right.
can only control what you do.
Right. Yes. It's so, yes, accepting that is certainly a hard time. But like, I would love to be a puppet master at times and control people's actions, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not happening. Oh my gosh. Well, so now we've reached the point where I want you to, we're going to turn it over to me and you're going to ask
Right.
me, turn it over to you. You ask me, what is the thing you'd like to ask me? Is there something that,
Right.
oh my gosh, I'd love to ask Heather this thing. You just ask me. I could really be anything.
Yes, I would love to. So one of the things that I know in the email that you had sent me before this of questions that maybe we would discuss, clearly in this last year and a half, there's been a lot of things that we've all been dealing with, whether personally, professionally. But we were talking about, where we're both located earlier, and I'm based out of Minneapolis. And so I know a passion of yours is diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all of that. And so here in Minneapolis, we are where a lot of the conversation started a year ago with um, the death of George Floyd and Dante Wright, and the aftermath of that, and certainly I think across the country, organizational leaders were having tough conversations about this topic, and conversations where it suddenly felt urgent, where it probably was been urgent for people for a long time, right? And it was just
Mhm.
now it was in front of us and it was right there. And I think one of the things that I've struggled with a bit, and so I'm curious of your thoughts on this, Heather, is I feel as though because it was right in our backyard, because it was right there, it was this feeling of what do we do? And we start going through all of the what are we doing in terms of education? What are we doing in terms of having the conversations internally? What are we doing to make sure that we're a more diverse workforce? But I have this concern, this lingering concern as we move out of the immediate and we continue forward, that I want to keep that sense of urgency there. But I'm worried about it being a check the box type of thing for organizations or for leaders. Like, oh yes, you should be recruiting more diverse people. Yes, you should be making sure your workplace is inclusive. You check the box that you're recruiting at historically Black colleges and universities. You check these boxes, right? But that's not what caring leadership is, right? Is checking boxes. So I'm curious from your perspective, how do you make sure as a leader that those efforts around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all of those things aren't just check the box? How do you make sure that it is more than that?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say, here's what I would say first, like organizationally, I think having a strategic plan in place, having a plan that has DEIB components spread throughout the organization's strategic plan will keep folks' eyes on the prize. Because if you don't incorporate it into the overarching plan, then it's like this side of desk thing, and then it becomes less important over time, particularly when the news kind of simmers down.
Sure.
I would say another really big thing that organizations don't do enough of, but that should do, is storytelling. So they should be
Ooh, yeah.
socializing the stories that they're getting either through DEI surveys, through roundtables, through manager, whatever it is, getting surveys, getting stories, grabbing stories, and then socializing them amongst everybody so that it stays in our hearts, it stays lodged in our hearts and our minds, so that we don't just go, oh, the news is simmered, we don't see it anymore, we don't need to do it anymore. But if we continue to show like this, I have one where there was right in front of me, there was a microaggression that took place, and there was so much grace that happened between two people of different backgrounds. And so I end up bringing on my podcast, and I end up doing a LinkedIn live, and it was like, how many more ways can I socialize their story, their message, and the grace they gave each other in the moment? And I
Yeah.
think that's the kind of stuff we have to be sharing in organizations to keep it alive, to keep it not off the radar, and to keep it from being side of desk.
I love that storytelling. That's huge. I think that's where it feels going through the motion if you don't make it human and you don't. Yes, storytelling is huge. I love that. That's great advice. And I do think your message too about the strategic plan of having it woven throughout that versus this thing on the side,
Yeah,
you know.
happens a lot. So I'm like, I'm in
Yeah,
this, like, I'm in that mode now where I'm talking to clients like, okay, well, let's not have a separate document. Let's actually merge it into this, and let's
yeah,
like make sure it's on our
right.
dashboard at the top level. And so
Wow.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's
Great.
good
Thank
stuff.
you. I
Yeah, and
appreciate
thank
that.
you. Thanks for asking. That was a really I love that question. Thanks. Okay, so now for those who are listening, who may need a little bit of extra motivation, who maybe they want to like be, starting a lemonade stand, or right, in their own way, or they want to be the person who goes and stops that. Well, what would be a couple pearls of wisdom you'd leave the listeners with today that could get them through the rest of the week?
Right. Yeah, I think I'd reiterate the one I said at first, right? It doesn't have to be grand. It can be the smallest thing. And I think it is that, you know, start small, try something small. It doesn't have to be huge. Again, take a note card sitting note close to you, take a post-it note for all it is, and write a quick note and go drop it on somebody's desk. That smallest thing is huge. Don't diminish the value of that. But I think the other big thing that I would say is if you want to be a caring leader, you have to be willing to be cared for. I think sometimes we feel as leaders that we need to be demonstrate strength and resiliency and a tough, like we can handle the hard things that come our way. And I think if we don't demonstrate a willingness to be cared for, it makes other people feel like they may not be worthy of care themselves. And so I would say part of where probably some of my caring nature came from is I've dealt with tough things in my life. We all have. I've dealt with some tremendous grief and loss, and that has given me an appreciation for life. It's given me an appreciation for the fact of what really matters. And I have been transparent with people when I've gone through some hard times and I've shared my stories. So back to that storytelling thing, I've shared my stories, but I have allowed myself to be cared for by my team. I've allowed myself to be cared for where um, I think that just creates a caring culture, right? Because it shows that nobody is uh, nobody, it's everybody's job, right? It's everybody's job to do that, and that it's not one directional, it's not top down, it's multi-directional. And so I think that's my advice to people is be willing to be cared for, be willing to tell people if you're um, what's going on in your life. That in itself, I think has truly allowed me to be that authentic, caring leader and have other authentic, caring leaders around me.
Mm. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love this. The first chapter in the book is on self-leadership. And I'm not sure I did as good a job as you just did in the entire book, tying together this fact of, I say like involving them and like, and making sure that, you allow them to shoulder the burden and you do this, and you do that. And so there is that idea of willingness to be cared for, but I don't think I was explicit as you are, which I think I should have been. I like that the way you stated that. Really, like at a third grade level, connecting the dots, because
Mhm.
sometimes we just can't, we hear like cliches or the simple things and it sounds cliches, but sometimes it's like we need to hear that, because sometimes the simplicity of things is the thing that's the most powerful for us,
Right.
instead of being like super academic or being, really complicated about a concept. It is in fact that, which is a part of this TEDx I'm doing too, which is like, we all want to be cared for. Like we all want people to care for us, but are we willing to do it? And are we willing to do it for ourselves? Like, it's like all these are the
Right.
questions I want
Yeah.
you to ask yourselves, And so I love it. Absolutely love this. This has been such a blessing. And I am just so happy I scrolled and saw that amazing
Me
lemonade
too.
story
Thank you.
as well. Oh my gosh. For those who are listening right now, if you really have found great value in my discussion with Jana, make sure you share this episode far and wide, because this is how we start to socialize the issues. We help other leaders as just by sharing. And don't forget to go write the 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, because again, it brings us up. In fact, I have been, my team has told me that we are moving up on the management podcast ranks worldwide. So that's kind of exciting. And that's just because it's real here. right? It's real. We don't just talk about all the good stuff. We also talk about times when we weren't so great. And I think that's where the learning takes place. So thanks everybody for listening. It's been amazing. And of course, Jana, thank you again. It's just been a blessing for me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.